August 2nd, 1947. Above the jagged peaks of the Andes, a single word echoes through the static: STENDEC, 3 times transmitted with unwavering clarity. Then, 50 years of silence. Welcome to Never Solved. Today we open the file on the Stardust, a plane that vanished into thin air, only to be returned by a glacier half a century later. This is the story of a routine flight, a final message no one can decode, and the mountain that kept its secrets. In the aftermath of World War II, the sky was the new frontier. British South American Airways was leading the charge. The Stardust was a civilian version of the Lancaster bomber. Powerful, sleek, and built for the long haul across the Atlantic. At the controls was Captain Reginald Cook, a decorated veteran. Beside him, a crew of 5, all experienced, all ready for the final leg to Santiago. On board were 6 passengers. A king's messenger with diplomatic pouches. A businessman rumored to be carrying a fortune in diamonds. A German émigré returning home. Travelers from across the globe, each with their own story, none knowing it was their last. They took off from Buenos Aires at 1:46 p.m. It was a clear day at the airport, but the Andes were waiting with a winter storm. As the plane climbed to 24,000 feet, the weather turned. The crew was flying blind, relying on calculations and the steady pulse of the radio. The winter of 1947 was brutal. Heavy snow and high winds lashed the fuselage as they pushed westward toward the Chilean border. Radio operator Dennis Harmer remained in constant contact with the ground. Everything seemed routine, until the very end. At 5:41 p.m., Harmer sent his final transmission. He gave their estimated time of arrival at Santiago, 5:45, 4 minutes away. Then he added the word that would haunt aviation for decades: STENDEC. The ground operator asked him to repeat it. Twice more, Harmer sent it. Clear, rapid, certain, STENDEC, STENDEC, and then the radio went dead. The Stardust never landed. No distress signal was sent. No explosion was seen. The plane simply ceased to exist. For 5 days, search teams battled the elements. BSAA's director personally led the hunt, scouring the peaks of the Andes. They found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no footprints. The mountains were as silent as the radio. As the weeks turned into months, the world began to wonder. How does a modern airliner vanish just minutes from its destination? The absence of evidence created a vacuum, and into that vacuum stepped theory after theory. Sabotage was the first. Was the king's messenger the target? Did someone destroy the plane to bury the documents he carried? There was no way to know. Then there was the Palestinian businessman. Rumors of a massive diamond sewn into his suit sparked tales of a mid-air heist gone wrong. For decades, these stories were all people had. But the word STENDEC fueled a different kind of speculation altogether. UFO enthusiasts claimed it was a code for alien abduction. In the 1960s, a Spanish magazine even named itself after the word. But while the world debated, the Andes were working in silence. The plane wasn't gone, it was just moving. Glaciers are not static, they are slow-motion rivers of ice, grinding down anything that falls into their path. In 1998, 2 climbers on Mount Tupungato saw something that shouldn't have been there. A piece of twisted metal, glinting in the sun. It was a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, one of 4 that had once powered the Stardust. 51 years later, the mountain had spoken. In 2000, an official expedition reached the site. They found more than just metal. They found clothes, personal items, and remains. The glacier had carried the Stardust nearly half a mile down the slope. The question wasn't where it was anymore. It was why it crashed. To understand the crash, we have to look at a phenomenon the 1947 crew knew nothing about: the jet stream. High above the Andes, powerful winds can blow at over 150 miles per hour. The Stardust was flying right into one. The crew was using dead reckoning. They calculated their position based on time and speed, unaware of the massive headwind. They thought they had cleared the peaks. They thought they were over the Chilean valley. In reality, they were miles behind schedule. When they began their descent, they didn't see the mountain in the clouds. They flew directly into a snow-covered ridge at full speed. The impact likely triggered an immediate avalanche. In seconds, the plane was buried. It vanished from the world in an instant. The science of the crash is solid. But science doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the last word. If the crew was confused by the wind, if they were about to crash, why send a word that had no meaning? Some believe it was a spacing error. STENDEC is remarkably similar to the code for the Santiago airport. A tired hand, a cold room. Others suggest hypoxia. At 24,000 feet without a pressurized cabin, the brain starts to fail. Meaning becomes jumbled. Letters slip. But these are just theories. The record shows that Harmer was a professional. He repeated the word twice, he was sure. Even after the wreckage was found, even after the DNA was matched, the file on STENDEC remains open. It is the last word of a vanished age. What do you believe? Was it a simple mistake by a dying crew? Or is there a layer to this story we have yet to uncover? Tell us in the comments. Which theory do you find most convincing? And which vintage mystery should we open next? If you enjoyed this deep dive, consider subscribing to Never Solved. We keep the files open for the stories the world forgot. I'm your host, and this has been the story of the Stardust. The mountains may have returned the plane, but they kept the answer. The Stardust was just one of many. BSAA's fleet was haunted by disappearances, each one adding a new layer to the growing legend. The Star Tiger and Star Ariel also vanished without a trace. Some whispered of the Bermuda Triangle, but the truth was likely more grounded. Air Vice Marshal Don Bennett was the force behind the airline. His relentless drive for efficiency often pushed men and machines to their limits. Bennett personally searched for his lost planes, a lone figure against the indifference of the geography. He never found what he was looking for. What of the rumored fortune? The Palestinians' diamond, the diplomatic secrets, were they really the reason for the silence? Investigators found no evidence of gold or gems in the ice. Only the mundane remains of a journey interrupted. Personal trinkets, letters, life. Time has a way of smoothing over the sharp edges of a tragedy. The glacier moved at a rate of just a few inches every year. By the time the wreckage emerged, the world that the Stardust left behind was gone. The passengers were ancestors, the technology, ancient. Even the radio technology of 1947 was prone to echoes and ghost signals. Could STENDEC have been an atmospheric anomaly? Signals bouncing off the ionosphere, distorted by the very storm that claimed the plane. A word born from static and a tired mind. Captain Cook was a veteran, but he was also human. The pressure of the schedule, the weight of the mission, it all converges in the cockpit. We will never know the final conversation between the crew as the clouds closed in. The cockpit voice recorder had not yet been invented. Mount Tupungato stands as a silent sentinel. It saw the impact, it held the secret, and it chose the moment to reveal it. For those who died, the mountain is a grave. For the rest of us, it is a reminder of the limits of our own understanding. DNA testing in 2002 finally gave names back to the remains. It provided a closure of sorts, but the word STENDEC was not in the genes. Families who spent a lifetime wondering finally had an answer to the where. But the why of that final message remained elusive. Was it an anagram? Descent jumbled into STENDEC. Critics argue Morse operators don't think in anagrams when minutes from landing. The human mind craves meaning in the meaningless. We see patterns in the clouds and messages in the static. We want there to be a reason. The Stardust remains a ghost of the Andes. Its story is woven into the fabric of aviation lore, a cautionary tale of the unknown. In the end, perhaps the word doesn't matter. Perhaps the silence that followed is the only message we were ever meant to receive. Our job is not to solve every mystery, but to remember those who were lost within them, to keep the fire burning for the forgotten. Every file we open is a life re-examined. Every story we tell is a journey home for those who never made it back. The Stardust casts a long shadow across the history of flight. It reminds us that even with all our technology, the world is still vast, and sometimes, the most important thing we can say is that we simply do not know. The mystery is the only truth we have left. STENDEC. A word, a code, a mistake. Whatever it was the last thing the world heard from a plane that refused to stay lost. The file remains open, the mountains keep their watch, and the answer remains buried under 50 years of ice and silence. Among the crew was Iris Evans, a veteran of the Women's Royal Naval Service. She was the one who ensured the comfort of the passengers as the storm closed in. We can only imagine her calm presence in those final minutes, a contrast to the turbulence and the growing cold of the unpressurized cabin. By 1949, the company was absorbed. Its stars had fallen, leaving only a legacy of mystery and a warning for the future of aviation. By 1949, the company was absorbed. Its stars had fallen, leaving only a legacy of mystery and a warning for the future of aviation. Navigation in 1947 was an art as much as a science. Without ground-based beacons, pilots were at the mercy of their own calculations. A single error, a misjudged wind, or a few minutes of lost time could mean the difference between a safe landing and a mountain peak. The Stardust had everything it needed for a routine flight: fuel, weather reports, a capable crew. But the Andes don't care about checklists. In the end, it was a battle between man and mountain. And the mountain has all the time in the world. Could the radio itself have been at fault? A short circuit, a surge of power, a word distorted by the very storm it tried to pierce. We look for logic in the message, but perhaps the word was never meant to be a word at all. Perhaps it was just the sound of a system failing. Beyond the theories and the physics, there are the people, the 6 passengers who were simply trying to reach their destination. They are the real story of the Stardust, not a code, not a mystery, but a group of lives lost to the ice, 50 years from home. There are thousands of such files, thousands of stories waiting to be told. Join us as we explore the shadows of history. Subscribe to Never Solved. Help us find the threads of the past that have been lost in the fabric of time, one file at a time. The file remains open. Thank you for watching Never Solved. Subscribe for more open cases and join us in the comments.